The storm hit West Virginia 2 hours before my daughter decided to leave me on a mountain. I want you to remember that detail. Not because it excuses anything, because it's the first lie I told myself that night. That the weather was the reason, that somehow rain and thunder had softened something in Claire's heart just enough to let it happen. I know better now. The storm didn't do this. My daughter did. My son-in-law did. And I let them get close enough to do it. My name is Arthur Voss. I'm 67 years old. I spent 41 years building bridges across this state. Real ones, steel and concrete, spanning rivers that swallowed men whole if you didn't respect them. I know what it means to carry weight nobody sees. I know what happens when you cut corners on something that's supposed to hold. I just never thought I'd learn that lesson from my own family. That night we were coming back from Charleston, from a neurologist who'd spent 40 minutes telling me things about my spine I already knew. Nathan drove. Claire sat up front with him, the way she always did now, like I was cargo in the back seat instead of her father. Rain came down sideways on Route 39, the kind that turns headlights into smears of white nothing. I remember thinking, just get us home, boy. Doesn't have to be pretty, just has to be safe. He was going too fast for the curves. I said something about it. Gentle, the way you talk to a man you're depending on. Nathan's jaw tightened in the mirror. You want to drive, old man? I didn't answer. 40 years of foreman taught me when silence does more work than words. I should tell you a little about who I used to be to them, before all this, before you decide you already understand this family. Claire was my whole world after her mother died. 6 years now since I buried Ruthie, and every one of those years I watched Claire disappear a little more into somebody else's shape. Nathan's shape. He wasn't cruel at first. He was hungry. Hungry for a business that would make him somebody in a town that mostly forgot he existed. I helped him build that hunger into something real. Signed off on jobs. Caught mistakes that would have bankrupted him twice over. Never took $1 for it. Never wanted to. My daughter's husband, I told myself that meant something. 2 years ago, I sold my house. Moved into their spare room. To help with the mortgage, I said. Ruthie's ghost was too loud in that empty house anyway. I told myself I was doing them a favor. You believed that, Arthur. You actually believed you were the one doing the favor. The mockery started small. A joke about my cane at dinner. Nathan forgetting my pills were due. Claire laughing along at things that used to make her flinch. I told myself grief does strange things to people. I told myself she still loved me somewhere under all that noise. There was a Sunday in March. I remember because the dogwoods hadn't bloomed yet, and Ruthie always loved that first week they came out white against the gray, when Nathan told a table full of his business friends that I was the family's little charity case. Everyone laughed. Claire laughed loudest. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth and I smiled, because that's what you do. You smile, and you tell yourself it's just a joke, and you go back to your room and you sit with it alone until it stops burning. I was wrong about a lot of things that year. I was about to be wrong about something that could have killed me. If you're the kind of person who believes family should be the one place you're safe, wherever you're watching from tonight, I'd love to know. And if stories like this one, about betrayal and what a person does with it, hit something in you, stick around. This one's going to matter. We were 40 minutes from home when the rain turned into something biblical. Nathan had the wipers on full, and it still wasn't enough. Route 39 climbs through the ridges up past Cutlass Gap, switchback after switchback, no guardrails in half the turns, just a long black drop into trees that had been there since before any of us were born. I felt it before I understood it. A shift in the car. Nathan's hands tightening on the wheel, not from the storm, but from something else. Something he'd been carrying the whole drive, maybe the whole year, finally deciding it was done waiting. Nathan, Claire said, soft, uncertain. What are you doing? He didn't answer her. He put the SUV in park in the middle of that dead mountain road, hazards blinking uselessly against sheets of rain, and for one long second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong, and you cannot get out of this car, Arthur. Too late. My door was already open. Nathan had come around in 3 strides, faster than I'd ever seen that soft, comfortable man move in 2 years of living under his roof, and his hand was already closing around the crutches propped beside my seat. "Get out," he said, calm, almost bored, like he was asking me to grab something from the trunk. I laughed, actually laughed, because for one stupid second I thought it was a joke, the kind of thing tired men say after a long drive. Then I saw his eyes, through the rain. No joke in them at all. Something colder. Something that had been waiting a long time for permission. "Nathan," he didn't let me finish. My crutches spun out of his hands into the dark, into mud I couldn't even see, just heard. A wet, final sound, swallowed whole by the storm. Gone. Just like that. The only thing standing between me and the ground, thrown away like garbage on a road with no name I'd ever remember, in weather that could kill a man half my age. I looked at my daughter. "Claire, look at me. Say something. Stop this. You are still in there somewhere. I know you are." She didn't stop it. She laughed. "God help me," she laughed, bright and sharp, the same laugh I used to hear when she was 6 years old, and I'd toss her in the air at the lake behind Ruthie's mother's place. That sound, wearing a stranger's cruelty like a coat that didn't fit her at all, and somehow fit her perfectly. "Bye, Dad." Her window was already going up. "Go meet a grizzly bear. You're an embarrassment to us." Us, not him. Us. That word did more damage than the fall itself. The SUV's taillights cut 2 red lines through the rain, then swallowed themselves into the dark. The sound of the engine faded into thunder, and then there was nothing. Just me, 67 years old. No crutches, no phone that had signal out here. Standing, barely standing, one hand on the guardrail post that marked the one safe stretch of that cursed road, on a mountain in West Virginia, in a storm that didn't care whether I lived to see morning. This is how it ends then. That was my first real thought, on my knees in mud that soaked through my slacks in seconds, cold enough to steal the breath right out of my chest. Not the neurologist's warnings, not old age creeping in the way I'd always quietly expected. My own daughter's laughter was going to be the last sound I ever heard on this earth, and some small, furious part of me refused to let that be true. No, something in me, something 41 years of building things that had to hold, refused to let go of, said no. I crawled. I want you to understand what that means for a man my age, with a spine that barely tolerates crutches on a good day. I crawled through mud and wet leaves and root systems that tore my palms open, because somewhere in the black tree line I remembered a rusted forest. Service call box from a hunting trip decades ago, back when Ruthie was still alive and Claire was still a girl who thought her father could fix anything. If it was still there, if it still worked. If. Every foot forward was a bet against the dark, against my own body, against the 11 years since I'd last needed a favor big enough to justify the phone call I was about to make. It took me 90 minutes to cover 400 yards. Lightning gave me the world in flashes, 3 seconds of gray-green forest, then black again, then rain so hard it felt like gravel against my face. The box was still there, rusted, half swallowed by ivy, the little metal door screeching when I forced it open with hands I could barely feel anymore. My fingers shook so badly I dropped the receiver twice before I got a dial tone. An honest-to-God dial tone, some forgotten line the county never bothered to disconnect. And when I finally got through, I didn't call 911. I called a name I hadn't dialed in 11 years, a man who owed me something no apology could ever cover, a debt from a bridge collapse in 1984 that should have killed him and 8 other men and didn't, because I caught what the inspectors missed, 3 days before the concrete would have failed under full load. Reggie Okafor answered on the 3rd ring, voice thick with sleep. "Arthur? It's 2 a.m, what?" "Reggie." My voice didn't sound like mine. Steadier than I felt. Colder than I'd ever heard it. "I need a favor, not a rescue. A favor." Long silence on the line. I could hear him sitting up, the creak of a bed, a woman's voice murmuring something in the background. Then, "Where are you?" I told him. He didn't ask why I was standing in the rain at midnight with no crutches 400 yards from a mountain road with no name. Men like Reggie learn not to ask certain questions until they already know they want the answer. He found me an hour later, half frozen under the awning of the call box, wrapped in a blanket from his truck, before I even had the strength to thank him. He begged me to let him drive straight to the hospital in Beckley. I refused. Told him to take me home instead. Our home. Claire and Nathan's home, the one with my name nowhere on the deed, the one I'd helped pay for without ever asking to be remembered for it. The lights were dark when we pulled into the driveway. Their SUV sat there, engine still ticking as it cooled in the rain. They'd been back for hours. Hadn't called. Hadn't looked for me. Hadn't wondered, even once, whether the old man they left on a mountain in a storm was alive or dead in a ditch somewhere off Route 39. Reggie wanted to come in with me. I told him no. Told him to go home, that I'd call him tomorrow, that there was work coming his way. Real work. The kind he used to be good at before he traded a hammer for a badge and then a badge for a private investigator's license nobody in this town knew he still carried. I let myself in with the key I still had. Toweled off in the dark bathroom, careful not to make a sound. Changed into dry clothes without turning on a single light, my whole body shaking, whether from cold or something else I couldn't yet name. And then I sat in the living room armchair, Ruthie's old chair, the one Nathan always said was taking up space, and I waited. I heard their car doors an hour past midnight, laughter still in their voices, easy and light, the laughter of people who'd left nothing behind them on a mountain road but an inconvenience already forgotten. The front door opened. The hallway light clicked on. They saw me sitting there, dry, calm, alive. Claire's face went the color of old paper. Nathan froze in the doorway, like a man staring at something that shouldn't exist, something that should be 4 miles up a mountain, face down in the mud, not sitting in his dead mother-in-law's chair with the lamp off and a smile already forming. I smiled at them both, the same smile I used to give a bridge inspection that had just passed every load test I could throw at it. "I have a surprise for you," I said. Neither of them moved, neither of them breathed, and somewhere behind my own quiet smile, a part of me that used to build things meant to last 100 years was already drawing up very different blueprints. "This is only the beginning, Nathan. You have no idea what you just threw into that mud along with my crutches." They wanted an explanation. I gave them silence instead, and let the silence do what silence always does to guilty people. It grows teeth. "I have a surprise for you," I'd said, and then I simply stood, carefully, one hand on the arm of Ruthie's chair, no crutches, because Reggie had found me a cane from his truck bed, and I'd learned that night I could stand without one if I had to, and I walked past them both to my room and shut the door. I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to them argue in whispers down the hall, Claire's voice cracking somewhere around 3 a.m, Nathan's low and defensive. I couldn't make out words. I didn't need to. I already knew the shape of it. One of them scared of being caught being scared. Let them wonder. Let them lie awake, wondering what an old man with no crutches and a dead wife's smile could possibly have planned. That fear is the first thing I've built in 2 years that's actually mine. The next morning I made coffee like nothing had happened, sat at the table, read the paper. When Claire came down, hollow-eyed, she stood in the doorway for a long moment before she could make herself speak. "Dad, last night was a hell of a storm," I said, not looking up. "Glad you both made it home safe." She flinched like I'd struck her. That wasn't cruelty on my part, not yet. That was information. I wanted to know exactly how much guilt she was carrying, and the answer, written all over her face, was enough. Nathan didn't come down at all that morning. Smart man, in his own limited way. He knew a trap when the air around it changed, even if he couldn't see the shape of it yet. I want to tell you something about grief, because that's what came next, and I won't pretend otherwise. That night on the mountain broke something in me that had nothing to do with my body. I grieved my daughter the way you grieve the living, the cruelest kind of grief there is, because she was still right there across the table, wearing Claire's face, and the girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder at Ruthie's funeral was simply gone. I let myself have exactly one night for that. Alone, in the dark, silent, so no one would hear an old man cry over a daughter who was still breathing in the next room. Then I put it away. Because grief doesn't build bridges. Cold, patient clarity does. Some of you have written to me about family that stopped feeling safe somewhere along the way. A parent, a sibling, someone who was supposed to protect you and didn't. I don't know exactly what you carried into this story tonight, but I think you understand why I couldn't just let it go. I started small. Told Nathan over dinner 3 nights later that the storm had shaken something loose in me. A change of heart, I called it. Told him I wanted to help the business the way I used to, before the resentment crept in between us. I offered him my license, my reputation, my signature on the biggest bid of his career, the new Route 9 bridge contract, a county project worth more than his firm had touched in 5 years combined. I watched relief flood his face like sunrise. He actually reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. "Arthur, that means a lot." "It should. It's the last thing I'll ever give you, and you don't even know it yet." Claire watched all of this with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe, that the storm really had just been a storm, that her father's forgiveness meant she didn't have to sit with what she'd done. I let her believe that. For now, behind the scenes, I was building something else entirely. Reggie came by twice a week under the excuse of helping me with physical therapy, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was rebuilding my body. Every session in his truck, though, we spent an hour on something else, him laying folders across the tailgate, documents he'd pulled on Nathan's company. 2 near lawsuits I already half knew about. A pattern of falsified inspection sign-offs, stretching back 3 years. Contractors pressured into putting their names on work they'd never actually verified. Unlicensed subcontractors on at least 4 county jobs. "He's been getting away with murder," Reggie said, tapping a folder. "Man's one bad audit from losing everything. Then let's give him one." There was a 5th folder Reggie kept separate from the others, thinner, and every time I reached for it, he'd pull it back. "Not yet, Arthur. That one you're not ready for." I didn't push. I've learned patience costs nothing and buys you everything. The physical part of my transformation mattered more than I expected it to. 6 weeks of therapy, real therapy, not the half-hearted stretches I'd been doing before, and I went from needing crutches every day to needing them only on the worst ones. I started walking the block behind the house each morning before Claire and Nathan woke, cane in hand, and something about that solitary hour felt like reclaiming ground that had been stolen from me on that mountain road. I also reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 15 years. Delphine Marsh, a state bridge inspector I'd mentored back when she was fresh out of engineering school and terrified of her own authority. She remembered me the second I said my name. "Arthur Voss. My God, I heard you retired." "I did. I'm calling about something else." I didn't ask her to do anything improper. I want to be clear about that, because what came later depended entirely on the fact that I never once asked Delphine to bend a single rule. I only asked her casually whether the state's audit division still did spot reviews on winning county bids. "More than ever," she said. "Budget cuts made everybody nervous. Anything flagged gets a second look automatically now." "Good. That's all I need you to be. Automatic." By late September, the leaves on the ridges had started turning, that first burnt orange creeping down from the highest elevations the way it always does in West Virginia, right on schedule. The world moving forward, whether or not you're ready for it. Nathan's bid for the Route 9 contract was due in 3 weeks. He'd handed me the final structural drawings to sign off clean, his words, full of a trust that made something in my chest twist with an emotion I refused to name. I sat with those drawings for 4 nights. What I did to them wasn't sabotage. I need you to understand that, because a lesser man in my position might have been tempted towards something that could actually hurt someone. I've spent my whole life making sure structures don't fail people. I wasn't about to start failing that principle now, no matter what Nathan had done to me. What I did was smaller and far more devastating in its own way. I left, buried in a load calculation most engineers would never think twice about, a single inconsistency. Not dangerous. Not something that would ever make it past a serious final review. But something that, if flagged, would trigger exactly the kind of automatic audit Delphine had described. A crack, small enough to hide, big enough to bring the whole structure of Nathan's lies down around it, once someone with the right eyes went looking. I signed my name beneath it anyway. My real signature. My real license number. Because everything after this needed to be true. Needed to be something no lawyer could later call manipulation or forgery. I wanted them to find exactly what was there. I wanted the paper trail to tell the truth I'd been swallowing for 2 years. The night the contract was officially awarded, Nathan threw a dinner. Champagne, his business partners, Claire glowing in a way I hadn't seen in months. He stood and raised his glass toward me, like I was the guest of honor. "To Arthur," he said, "for believing in me when it counted. You have no idea how much I'm believing in you right now, son. I'm believing you're exactly the kind of man who built this whole mess himself, brick by brick, corner by corner, and never once thought the bill would come due." I raised my own glass, met his eyes, and smiled the same smile I'd given him in the dark that first night home. "To new beginnings," I said, "and to everyone finally getting exactly what they've earned." Claire clinked her glass against mine, laughing, warm, the daughter I remembered flickering briefly across her face. For one unguarded second, I almost let myself hope this could still end some other way. Then my phone buzzed against my leg, silent, and I glanced down under the table without anyone noticing. A text from Reggie. Just 3 words, sent at 9:40 that evening, while champagne was still being poured around a table that had no idea what was coming. Opened the 5th folder. I looked up, smiled again for the room, excused myself to the bathroom 2 minutes later, hands trembling as I finally broke the seal on the folder Reggie had kept from me for 6 weeks. Inside was a single bank statement. Claire's name at the top, her mother's inheritance account, the one Ruthie had set up years ago, untouched, meant for Claire alone. The balance was a fraction of what it should have been, and every withdrawal, every single one going back 2 years, had Nathan's signature on it. He wasn't just cruel to me, he's been stealing from her. My God, does she even know? I sat on the edge of that bathtub for a long time, the sound of laughter and champagne glasses drifting faintly through the door, and understood for the first time that the revenge I'd built so carefully wasn't only mine to deliver anymore. Somewhere out there, a truth was waiting that would break my daughter's heart worse than anything I could ever engineer, and I was about to become the man who handed it to her. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat in my room with the bank statement spread across my knees, reading Nathan's signature over and over until the letters stopped looking like a name and started looking like a confession. 2 years, Nathan. 2 years of watching me struggle up the porch steps while you were emptying my dead wife's gift to our daughter. By morning, I had a decision to make, and it wasn't the one I expected. I could hand Claire that statement myself, watch her face break, and be the one she'd associate forever with the worst moment of her marriage. Or I could let the truth find her the way truth usually does, on its own without my fingerprints on the wound. I chose the second, not out of mercy, out of strategy. She needed to see Nathan clearly with her own eyes, because a version of the truth handed to her by the father she'd humiliated on a mountain road would never be believed the same way. I called Delphine instead, told her honestly that I had concerns about the Route 9 submission's load calculations, concerns any reasonable engineer would flag. I didn't tell her what I'd buried inside them. I didn't have to. That's the beauty of a flaw built correctly, it finds itself. The audit came 4 days later, faster than even I'd expected. State inspectors don't announce themselves politely. They arrived at Nathan's office on a gray October morning while he was mid-sentence in a meeting, and by that afternoon the whole county knew something was wrong with the Route 9 bridge bid. What started as one flagged calculation didn't stay contained to one calculation. That's how these things go. You pull one loose thread on a man who's been cutting corners for years, and the whole sweater comes apart in your hands. Delphine's team found the falsified inspection reports, found the unlicensed subcontractors, found 3 other jobs with the same pattern of shortcuts stretching back further than even Reggie's folders had shown. Nathan's company didn't just lose the contract. It lost everything. Criminal referral, not civil. His business partners scattered like the whole thing was contagious. He came to the house on a Tuesday evening, gray-faced, smelling like he hadn't slept in 3 days, and found me on the porch in the cold with a blanket over my knees and a cup of coffee going lukewarm beside me. "You did this," he said. Not a question. I set the coffee down. I signed my name to honest work, Nathan. If the truth destroyed you, that's not something I did. That's something you built, one lie at a time, long before that storm. You threw me under the bus for a bridge inspection. No. I stood, slow, steady, no crutches, no cane. Just my own 2 feet holding my own weight for the first time in longer than I could remember. I threw you nowhere. You threw me into the mud on a mountain in the pouring rain and told me to go meet a grizzly bear. Say it back to me. I want to hear you say it. He didn't. His silence was answer enough. I remember every word of it, I said quietly. I'll remember it the rest of my life. I didn't do this to you, son. You did this the night you decided I wasn't worth the trouble of stopping the car. I don't know what you would have done in my place. Maybe you'd have called the police that first night. Maybe you'd have driven away and never looked back. I chose something slower. I'm still not certain some nights if it was the right choice. Claire found the bank statement herself, 3 weeks later, going through Nathan's files while their lawyers argued over what remained of the wreckage. I know because she called me from her car, voice shaking in a way I hadn't heard since she was 17. Dad, he's been stealing from me, from Mom's account, 2 years. I let her cry on the phone for a long time before I said anything at all. When she finally came to me in person, it wasn't gratitude in her eyes. It was fury. You knew, she said. Didn't you? You knew about the money before I did. I didn't lie to her. I'd promised myself that first night on the mountain that whatever else I became, I wouldn't become a liar like the man who'd left me there. I knew, I said. Reggie found it weeks ago. And you let it go this far? You used my marriage falling apart as some kind of... Her voice cracked. Was any of it real? The forgiveness, the dinner. Was I just part of a plan? That question deserved an honest answer, and honest answers are rarely simple ones. Both things were true, I told her. I wanted justice for what happened on that road, and I wanted you to see him clearly, with your own eyes, because you never would have believed me if I'd just told you. I'm not proud of that calculation, Claire, but I won't pretend I didn't make it. She didn't speak to me again for 6 weeks. I want to tell you those 6 weeks were peaceful, that watching Nathan's world collapse gave me the satisfaction I thought it would. It didn't. There's a particular kind of hollow that comes after revenge finishes doing its work. The storm passes, the debris settles, and you're left standing in a quiet that doesn't feel anything like victory. I'd spent so long building toward that moment on the porch that I hadn't thought much about what came after it. What came after it was winter. A long gray West Virginia winter and an empty house, because Claire moved out to her cousin's place in Lewisburg while the divorce worked through the courts, and I was alone again with Ruthie's chair and a silence I'd forgotten how loud it could be. Reggie checked on me most weeks. Delphine sent a card at Christmas, but the daughter I'd built an entire second life around saving didn't call. Then, in March, a full year, almost to the week, since that storm on Route 39, my phone rang. Dad, Claire said, will you come with me somewhere? She drove us up Cutlass Ridge herself, the same road, clear weather this time, sun breaking weakly through bare branches that hadn't yet decided whether spring was really coming. She parked in almost the exact spot. I recognized the guardrail post I'd once gripped with a stranger's cold hand. We got out together. She walked ahead of me to the shoulder where the mud had long since dried and grown over with winter grass, and she stood there a long time before she spoke. I laughed, she said. I actually laughed, Dad. I've replayed it 1,000 times trying to understand who I was that night, and I can't. I don't recognize her. You were drowning, I said. In him. In everything he'd talked you into believing about me, about yourself. That doesn't excuse it, but I understand it better than I let myself admit for a long time. Can you forgive me? I thought about lying to make it easier for both of us. I didn't. I already have, I told her, and meant it because somewhere in that long winter I'd learned that carrying hatred for your only child is its own kind of mountain road with no guardrail. Forgiving you was never the hard part, Claire. Trusting you again. That's the part we're going to have to build slow, the way I used to build everything that mattered. She nodded, crying quietly, and for the first time in over a year, she reached out and took my arm. Not because I needed the support, but because she wanted to be the one holding on for once. We walked back to the car together, slow, unhurried, an old man and his daughter on a mountain road that no longer belonged only to the worst night of our lives. Nathan pled guilty to fraud that spring. 2 years suspended. Restitution he'll be paying off for the rest of his working life. His engineering ties in this state finished for good. I felt nothing when I heard the sentence. Not triumph, not relief. Just the quiet, tired satisfaction of a man who'd finally set down a weight he'd been carrying too long. I kept one thing from that night on the mountain. A folded scrap of paper I'd written to myself in Reggie's truck, soaked through, ink bleeding at the edges. 5 words I'd scrawled by penlight while I still didn't know if I'd survive till morning. I never showed it to Claire. I keep it in my coat pocket still, worn soft at the folds. I raised her better than this. She proved me right, in the end. Just took the long way there. Same as most things worth having. I think about that night often, the crutches spinning into the dark, my daughter's laughter swallowed by the storm. I don't know if everyone who's ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love them finds their way back the way we did. I'm not sure I'd recommend the path I chose to anyone else. So, I'll leave you with the only question that's ever really mattered to me since that road. If it had been you, kneeling in that mud,